Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's free public webinar entitled the 2021 NFPA 70E document and the changes to that document we'd like to highlight in today's free public session. Welcome, my name is Ryan Smith, Product Manager here with TPC Training, and I am joined here by our expert on electrical safety, Bob Kluke, one of our instructors here with TPC Training, and a master contractor in a bunch of different states here as well. So he brings lots of experience to the table, and he's going to walk us through the different changes here to NFPA 70E for this upcoming code year. Before we get started, I would like to let everyone know that this session is live here today, and because of that, we actually have a chance to interact with one another. So what I'd like you all to feel welcome to do is share with us your questions that you have on the topic as we go through the session. You'll see at the top of your toolbar, or maybe along the bottom of your toolbar, along with your controls, you should see a Q&A button. You can go ahead and click there and type in any of the questions you are having on the topic. And it'll come to us on the panel and we'll be able to answer your questions at that time. So what we can also be sure to do is let you know that this session is being recorded. So this recording will be posted to the TPC Training website here within about 2 business days of this session. So be on the lookout for an email giving you the link to that recording, as well as the PDF of these slides for your download and for use with your colleagues. So with that being said, we're looking forward to a great session, but before we get started with Bob, I would like to open the session by hearing from all you who are here on the call with us today. And I would like to launch a poll, an interactive poll with a couple questions just to get us all started on the topic of electrical safety. So what I'm going to do for y'all is launch a poll. It has 3 questions on it, and it should be popping up on your screen right now. And what I'd like you to do is basically click what your answer is to each of these questions based on your experience in your organization. First question being, how recently has your organization offered NFPA arc flash safety training? Within the last year, between 1 and 3 years ago, over 3 years ago, or never, right? What format is that safety training, if you do have it? Is it self-guided online training? Is it classroom training, virtual training over the internet, on-the-job training, or none of the above? You can select any that apply. And then finally, does your organization have what we call a qualified electrical worker program? And if you're not sure what that means, you can say, I don't know, and we're going to definitely talk about that and the ins and outs of that as well. So as we see the answers coming in, we got a lot of great answers coming in. Good, thank you for your participation here. I'll give you just a few moments to provide your answers, and then I'll share what the distribution of answers here is in just a moment. All right, looks like we got our answers in. So let's go ahead and end the poll and share the results. All right, so here's the results we're seeing here. And within the last year is the most common answer. So that's a good sign when it comes to electrical safety training, because it's got to be renewed for every 3-year code cycle. So if it has been over 3 years, it might be worth chatting to say, it's about time to get yourself retrained. Number 2, what is the most common format? Classroom instructor-led training is that format that is predominant. But the other ones are right at its heels in terms of online training, on-the-job training people are pursuing, and virtual training. And then finally, do you have a qualified electrical worker? Most people do. So that's a good thing. But also the second most popular answer here is not sure whether we do or don't. And so I think that's a good place for us to start, and a good way to kind of calibrate Bob here to what the audience is. So Bob, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'll monitor our chat line for us, so you won't have to worry about that. And I'll also be monitoring our questions throughout the session. So I'm looking forward to having our Q&A at the end of the session, everyone. But feel free to be asking those questions at any time, and I'll go through them, prioritize them for our instructor, and we'll go ahead and answer them. So without further ado, I'll give it over to Bob, and thanks so much for being here, Bob.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you everyone for attending this 2021 70E changes document. Remember that you will have time at the end for us to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So I'm going to go through the changes, and then I will be answering questions near the end when I turn it back over to Ryan. And feel free, like he said, the Q&A, type them in anytime, chat box, type them in anytime. Ryan will be monitoring all that for us. A little bit about TPC. We have been doing training for a very, very long time, and a lot of it is online or instructor-led. We do mechanical and electrical training. Pretty much, we've trained all over the world, and so whatever you need, at the end you will be able to see some contact information for us in case you have to know a little bit more about us. No issues. So a little bit about myself. You can see my name here now, and Ryan is right. I do hold multiple licenses in various states, but one of my expertise areas is NFPA 70E, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So no problem. I would like to mention that if you could get involved with the process sometime in these NFPA documents, it would be extremely helpful to everybody that uses these documents. And here is why: because if public input, or what they used to call a proposal, comes from you, then that is real world situations that we need to address. So here's what has happened in this 2021 process, that on June 27th of 2018, so you don't have a lot of time to put your proposals in, but a lot of public inputs. That was the closing date. Did receive 332 public inputs. During the first revision, they came up with 86 first revisions. And the second draft is important because on the second draft is when we can comment on any of these revisions that they're going to make. And I want to make sure you understand this, that all the information that we're going to be giving you today comes from the second revision. The document that you're seeing over here to the right, the picture of NFPA 70E, is not available yet. So the NFPA is going to get that to us on September 4th. So all of our information came really from the second revision, which is available on NFPA's website for anybody to look at. And the second revision is going to be very close to the final document. I mean, there might be just a few things there that could be different, but basically the second revision is the final document, and that is where we got all the information for this presentation today. So we're going to start in Article 100. In Article 90, there really was no changes. So in Article 100, though, definitions, there were some changes. In 2018, we saw the definition for barrier. Well, in 2021, they have deleted some wording at the end, which, or to prevent unauthorized access to work areas. So this right here has been deleted out of the 2021 version. And we might want to know why that was deleted. And so the reason why is this, is that the technical committee wanted to correlate that definition with how it was used up in Article 130. And so they revised it a little bit. And the statement that they gave us, that this revision does not prohibit the construction of a barricade, but it does now correlate with how it's used in the rest of the document. So that was the first one. The second one is balaclava sock hood. And so in 2018, this was our definition. In 2021, just a little bit different, protects the neck and head except for a small portion of the facial area. And basically, this is driven by industry, because there are manufacturers out there that give us different designs of the balaclava. So the technical committee wanted to reflect those different designs. And so the informational note always gives us great information. We understand that it might not be, a part of the document that we have to adhere to, but it definitely gives us extra information that helps us in implementing the document. So we'll see a few changes from the informational notes as we go through. So now we can see in 2018, the definition for electrically safe work condition. When I bring up the 2021 definition, we're not going to see any change at all, but we are going to see a new informational note. And that new informational note is going to be letting us know that this is not a procedure, it's a state. So our electrical equipment has been put in this state where everything has been brought to zero energy. It is de-energized, and this is going to be a temporary state to eliminate all the electrical hazards. And so they wanted to add that because too many people were getting caught up with the fact that this was a procedure, but it's definitely not a procedure. There are parts of this that we do have to do in the procedure. We do have to do a disconnection, that's for sure. We do have to perform lock and tag out. We do have to do live dead live to verify the absence of voltage. And if it is a chance of recurring or becoming re-energized, then we do have to temporarily ground it. But the technical committee wanted to make sure that we understood that this is not the procedure. This is just a state. So they added that informational note. In 2018, they had this definition on switchgear. And we could purchase switchgear that was arc resistant. Well, in 2021, they changed that term switchgear to equipment because we do have other equipment that can be arc resistant. We could buy motor control centers that are arc resistant. We could buy main distribution panels. So there's a lot of different equipment out there other than switchgear that can be arc resistant. And the technical committee wanted to make sure they reflected that in this 2021 version. They did give us an informational note to go along with that, just letting us know that IEEE does have a guide for testing arc-rated switchgear. And I can let you know that the IEEE is going to be developing a guide for all arc-resistant equipment. So that's just a change from switchgear to all equipment that could be arc-resistant. Shock hazard, another definition that went through a little bit of a change here. So in 2018, they told us exactly what it was, but now what did they do? In 2021, they have put this word in, exposed. And this is a great change because if all of the covers are on, if there are no exposed energized conductors or circuit parts, well, then we don't have a shock hazard because there's nothing we can touch to allow us to receive that shock. And I always told my classes when I taught this definition was everything has to be exposed. If we don't have anything exposed, then we have no hazards and nothing applies. So that's important, and that's a great change. That really clarifies a lot for us. So when we do have those exposed conductors or circuit parts, then that's when we are going to have a shock hazard, and that usually occurs above 50 volts. A little bit of a change here with an informational note for nominal voltage, and they wanted to give us an addition about some DC storage battery units. And so they're letting us know that a lot of these are at a nominal voltage of 48 volts, but they do have a floating voltage when they're charging can get all the way up to 58 volts. And so what the document is saying now, we're just going to say for DC applications, 60 volts is going to be used to cover the entire range of these charging voltages that they might have. So another good informational note in Article 100. Now we've got to Article 110, and Article 110 saw a lot of things be rearranged. And you can see in 2018 where it says .1, that was our electrical safety program. Well, now we definitely can see that got moved to 110.5, and same corresponding all the way down. Everything that is on the left got moved to a different section. And here's the reason why, is they wanted to make Article 110 in the same format of almost any NFPA document you would go into, and have the beginning of it sort of be a little generic. And if you're familiar with the National Electrical Code, you know sometimes at the beginning of those articles, we would see the scope, what the article is going to be covering for us. And so there were some things in 2021 that they wanted to really stress in the beginning of Article 110. So we'll take a look at that. And the first one now for 110.1 is hazard elimination. We've got to have this at the top of our mind whenever we're doing a job briefing, or if we're doing a risk assessment. This is our first priority, is that we want to eliminate the hazards. Now, this was in Article 105.4. They wanted to get it to the front of Article 110 so that it's sort of higher on our list. And they give us 6 ways that we can control those hazards, but elimination is the top choice. And so they wanted to make sure that we understood that we don't just want to grab our personal protective equipment to go out and perform some task when it might be possible to eliminate that hazard altogether. So they've done that, and they gave us a new informational note here, letting us know that the electrical safe work condition is a state again. It's not a procedure. So, and then they tell us we can look up into Article 120 to look at the procedure if we want to, on how to establish this state of the electrically safe work condition. And there are 8 steps to that, and that procedure did get changed just a little bit here in 2021. So, and the committee statement on all of this is that they did, in the informational note, they did replace zero energy because that was never defined. So there was no definition for that, and they replaced it with the term de-energize, which is defined. And so that is going to reflect more what the technical committee wants us to understand. De-energized is a little bit better term than zero energy. In 110.2, it's just a clarification. The third sentence that was in there in 2018 was pretty much identical to the very first sentence. So they did delete this. And what we should know is that this whole paragraph here was in Article 120, which is how to establish that electrically safe work condition. And it did get moved into 110.2, which, and just a clarification, just making sure that electrical conductors and circuit parts shall not be considered to be in that electrically safe work condition until we've met all the requirements of Article 120. So they're telling us this in 110 now, so that we would have to get up to 120 to look at those procedures that they have on how to establish that electrically safe work condition. 110.3, electrically safe work condition. This one also has been relocated a little bit. It used to be up in 130.2, and so they put it down here in 110.3 again to emphasize it. And one of the issues that the technical committee had was they're talking about an employee performing work. So we can see that before an employee performs work inside the limited approach boundary, they want us to establish an electrically safe work condition. And there was an issue about if an employee is working or not. So they wanted to get rid of that if they possibly could. If you are inside that limited approach boundary, then they do believe you could just be in there observing it, and you could actually be working. Doesn't have to mean that you're physically doing something. So they gave us a statement there to help clarify that a little bit, and just wanted to let us know that. And they did move this section also. Now we're going to be up into 110.5, and some of the information that did get changed there a little bit. And you can see here that in 2018, they're talking about the employer has to implement an electrical safety program. So every employer in the United States needs an electrical safety program. At the bottom of this little paragraph here, there was a reference that it could be part of our overall occupational safety and health management system. Well, you can see that that wording does not appear in 2021. And that's going to be true of a lot of wording that gave a reference to some type of safety management system. Those are, and are all going to be gone. And what is going to take its place is this, is that there is going to be an informational note that is going to reference Annex P. So the correlating committee wants all references to these safety management systems to be removed from the actual document and now to be in an annex. And so that's exactly what happened. They are in Annex P now. We can take a look at Annex P. We can still see the relationship between a safety management system and 70E. It's just not part of the actual wording that's in the document itself. 110.5 addresses human error, and there is some new wording here that when we are doing a risk assessment procedure, we do have to take into consideration the capabilities of the person that will be performing that work. And the new wording is pretty much that the risk assessment procedure has to take into consideration the equipment relative to the electrical hazards in the workplace. So that's going to address some of the ideas that have we been maintained properly? And is this going to be an issue for maybe a new worker that doesn't have the experience of an older worker? So the abilities of that person performing that work will have to be addressed in the risk assessment. And then the informational note tells us that we can go to Annex Q to take a look at how the human error factor could play into our job briefing. Also in 110.5, you can see that we have to have a policy inside of our electrical safety program, a policy with procedures in it of how we are going to establish that electrically safe work condition. So we could go up into Article 120 and we could see the steps and work that into our electrical safety program, no issues. But we definitely have to have a policy in there that's going to address that electrically safe work condition. They wanted to make sure we were on top of that one. Here is one that I think is a great change. I love this one. So in 2018, what we saw here was this. We saw just retraining. That was the only word we saw when it came to retraining. Now they added in additional training, which thank goodness makes sense. I mean, and I'm going to give you an idea why that makes sense. And it makes sense because this pretty much number one, if you come down and take a look at number one, the supervision or inspection. So we do have to do an audit each year of our qualified workers to make sure they are complying. But if we find that a person is not complying, well, in 2021, it pretty much said we had to retrain. But they're going to give us an informational note on this, that if a person is not complying just because they don't want to, well, we don't have to retrain. There are other avenues we can go, and whatever those avenues might be is not retraining if they are just willfully not complying. So that's good. And then additional retraining. I mean, if new equipment shows up, it's brand new. Well, this is not going to be a retraining, right? It's going to be new training. So they did that's just a great thing, adding in those words, additional training there for us. And you're going to see now the committee statement that a lack of compliance does not really necessitate retraining. This can be addressed in other areas through your facility. And they are, again, referencing Annex Q, which deals with human performance. So hopefully a person does want to comply with 70E so they can make sure they are safe. Another great change when it comes to training, and in the environment that we're in today with COVID-19, I mean, the technical committee must have just been able to be reading people's minds, right? So informational note now, classroom training can include interactive, electronic, or interactive web-based training components. Never in there before. So before it said classroom, on the job, or a combination of the two. Well, was classroom a physical classroom, or could it be a virtual classroom? Nobody ever told us that. So now they did clear it up with this informational note. And it's a great thing because I can tell you I'm doing a lot of virtual training these days. And I did develop the new 2021 presentation that is going to be available as soon as 70E is published, right after the 1st of September here. And that new presentation, I just got to let you know, is so interactive. I mean, you see a picture of a piece of equipment, and we're going to have the attendees take control of the mouse and give us an idea what the hazards might be. Give us an idea how to do a risk assessment. So virtual training can be extremely interactive and sometimes even more effective. So I'm glad the technical committee made that change. That's just awesome. In 110.7, they are giving us an idea here about if you have outside contractors come on to your facility, or if you are an outside contractor, and it always said that we had to identify the hazards. So we had to have a documented meeting between the host employer and that contractor that might come on site. And so the new informational note, which I also believe is a great change, where we have many employers on the same site, that more than one employer can be responsible for identifying the hazards. So it doesn't always have to be that host employer. It can be a contractor, and that contractor sees something that the host employer might have missed. Well, then we can go ahead and notify everybody. You know, maybe we have a radiation problem or a chemical leak or whatever. And so more than one employer can be responsible for identifying those hazards. In 110.8, it does tell us here that only qualified people can perform testing. And so previously, the previous language was testing above 50 volts. And so now what does it say? Where an electrical hazard exists. And so that's a big change, because now we're not talking about just a shock hazard. We're talking about an arc flash hazard. We're talking about an arc blast hazard or a shock hazard. And where any of those hazards exist, then you better be qualified to be able to put that meter in your hand. And so what does that mean? A qualified person can identify those hazards. And we can see that a qualified person would have gloves on right now and would have a long sleeve shirt on. So just another good change, that it's going to reflect all the hazards that could be present, and we're going to have to be qualified to have that meter in our hand. Okay, 110.12 is brand new, and so they didn't move it around, they didn't change it up at all. This reflects really 110.3b from the National Electrical Code, that electrical equipment shall be used, we have no choice, in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And so that's important. Whatever the manufacturer gives us for information, we should document it electronically and in a hard copy. This is extremely important information for the authority having jurisdiction, that when the equipment is installed, that they are going to approve it to be able to have a certificate of occupancy. But we just have to understand this, that we cannot go outside those boundaries of what the manufacturer has given us for information. So now 70E has that inside their document also. In 120.2, where we are going to be performing lockout tagout, they have now told us that we've got to, and it's really highlighted in my italicized statement down here, that the lockout tagout procedure shall meet the requirements of applicable codes and standards. So OSHA, in their Code of Federal Regulations, they have a standard for the control of hazardous energy. ANSI also has a standard. And now we have to meet the requirements of all these other standards that are out there. So we've got to make sure that we're on top of any standard that might give us some good direction on how to perform lockout tagout. Okay, so still up here with lockout tagout in Article 120. If we do have a lock, and that lock has a way that it can identify who the person was that installed that lock, and we can meet 3 conditions, then we can use just a lock. We don't need any tag whatsoever. And the 3 conditions are what is new. So if we are working on only one circuit or one piece of equipment, and that's all we're de-energizing, that's our first condition. If we're not going to go ahead and move the responsibilities from one group to another group, different shifts or whatever, we're the only ones working on it. We're going to start the job. We're going to finish the job. And that any of the employees that are exposed to the hazards, as long as they are familiar with this procedure, then we can just have a lock that just identifies who put that lock on. So that's a nice change for us also, and helps us a little bit out there. New informational note here with capacitors. And I'm going to give you an idea that there is a new article in NFPA 70E. It's Article 360. It's going to deal strictly with capacitors. So that's why this informational note is referencing 360.3, 360.5, and we have a new annex on capacitors, informative annex R, working with capacitors. So they put that in there just to give us an idea that a little bit later in this presentation, a little bit later in the document, we do have a lot of new information about capacitors. This also is a great change on shock risk assessment, and it's going to align with what we have to do for arc risk assessment. So we have to do these risk assessments. We had to do a shock risk assessment prior to this, there's no doubt about it. But notice now it says that we have to take into consideration the design of the electrical equipment and the condition of maintenance. Hey, have we maintained this equipment properly over the years? Well, if we have not, then probably the chances of a shock occurring are going to be much higher than if we had maintained it. And this is language that was always with us when we did an arc risk assessment, and now it's going to be right here in the shock risk assessment also. We have to take into consideration the condition of maintenance of our equipment and how it was designed, because that could add additional chances or likelihood that our worker could get shocked. So they did a good job putting that into the shock risk assessment. A little bit of change with this table, 130.5C. They added a new task for us. And so this is the table, just so you know, that first of all, this column here addresses the condition of maintenance of the equipment. And you can see, doesn't matter if it's brand new, doesn't matter if it's as old as Bob. But in this right here, it says any. So doesn't matter the condition. And then over here, it's going to tell us, is there a chance for an arc flash? So this table has always identified certain tasks that could increase the likelihood of an arc flash. And the task that is new, operation of a circuit breaker or a switch for the first time after it was installed. So, or we did some maintenance to it. Maybe we even refurbished it a little bit. The chances of this causing an arc flash is greater than if that equipment has been used for a year or so with no issues whatsoever. Everything's been perfect with it. The first time we use it, or after we do something with maintenance on it, the likelihood could increase. And this table now reflects that change. This is the table that we use with the incident energy analysis method. And so it's going to give us an idea exactly what we have to wear if the incident energy falls between 1.2 and 12 calories. This, what you're seeing right now, really has not changed. What has changed, though, is some informational notes. Whoops. And the first one is footwear. So, and there's a little D, and you can see the D here, and these are all the notes to it. So, historically, it's been this. We're going to wear leather footwear or dielectric footwear that would protect us from a shock. And so, but now it says footwear other than leather or dielectric is going to be permitted as long as it has been tested to demonstrate it's not going to ignite, melt, or drip at whatever the incident energy is on the equipment that I'm working on. So, great informational note there. And another informational note that talks about if we're going to layer equipment on top of arc-rated clothing. For instance, maybe I need a high visibility vest, and I can purchase that arc-rated. For sure I can, because Bob has one that is arc-rated. And it might not have the same rating as my clothing underneath, because I can't purchase the high visibility vest, let's say, at a high cal rating. But I could purchase it at 8 calories or 10 calories. But the clothing underneath that I have on might be all the way up to 20 calories, and that's okay. So if it's on there for the reason of letting people know that I'm in that area, it's not required to be equal to or greater than the estimated incident energy exposure, as long as the clothing I have underneath is rated for that exposure. So another good informational note to here. In this section, 130.7C1, they're letting us know that the incident energy could be extremely high. And so let's say that it's switchgear. And the overcurrent device is actually the cutouts that the utility has. And so it's going to have a long clearing time. The incident energy, and I'm just going to throw a number out for you, 200 calories per centimeter squared. And maybe our clothing, maybe we don't have that type of clothing to be able to protect that worker. Excuse me. Well, they're telling us in this informational note now where that estimated incident energy is greater than the arc rating of what is commercially available arc rated PPE, then there's some things that we can do to reduce the likelihood of an occurrence of an arcing event. So one, they're telling us this, we can use a non-contact tester on the secondary side of a low voltage transformer before putting a contact tester on there. Also telling us that we can use our eyes. So we're just going to take an observation and make sure that if we did open up that circuit, that we can see that there are gaps there that are definitely letting us know that we have de-energized. Or we could increase the working distance. And we could consider some design options maybe to reduce the incident energy level. Put in some zone selective interlocking, maybe put in some class L fuses in front of that equipment so that we could get that incident energy down. So they're just giving us some idea here of what we could do in the case where the incident energy was much higher than what our clothing could accommodate. This is the table that we have for our rubber gloves. And in 2018, this table had the first column there, that's for sure. So it had the class of our glove there, no doubt about it. It also had the maximum AC use voltage for that particular glove. So a 00 glove could only be used up to 500 volts AC or 750 volts DC. What they removed from this table was the voltage that those gloves are tested to when we send them out every 6 months. But what they did add is the minimum distance between the gauntlet and the cuff. So we are going to have to see a little bit of that rubber protruding from the leather protector there. And so they are giving us an idea of what that minimum distance can be now. So that's a nice addition to this table, and thank the technical committee for that. This is a table that we've always had, 130.7C14, and it's just a table that would give us a reference to the standard, for example, for arc-rated clothing, or for how to launder that clothing. And what did they do? They have now added in some standards for IEC. So the International Electrotechnical Commission has some standards. Some of those standards are really good standards, just so you know. And so the IEC now has some of these standards, and they're just giving us a reference to those standards, allowing us to use either ASTM or ANSI or IEC or whatever we want to use. That's going to be our choice now. Brand new article, never before in NFPA 70E, Article 360. Quite a lot of information in this article for being new. Usually they introduce the article and it's kind of a bare bones article, but not in this one. So they're giving us a scope about what it's all about, a few definitions that are relative to only capacitors, and then they're giving us some hazard thresholds. And so that's good. Some specific measures for personal safety. What I guess you should understand about all of Chapter 3 is this, is that it can supplement or modify what we learned in Chapter 1. So we might see a little bit different personal protective equipment when we get up in here to Chapter 3. Also, the procedure for establishing an electrical safe work condition for capacitors, and some information about grounding sticks. So a great addition. Chapter 3 now has 6 articles in it, so all specific equipment. And then in the annexes, they made a few changes. One of the changes was in Annex D, where we have our calculation methods for incident energy. And one of the changes that they made in here is that IEEE came up with a new 1584 software. And so they wanted to make sure that those formulas got in Annex D, and sure enough, they did. In Annex F, they gave us some new procedures on risk assessment, especially when it deals with human behavior. And then Annex R, working with capacitors, brand new. And so all that information is now in the new annex that we have, Annex R. So I am now going to turn it back over to Ryan a little bit. I have addressed to you the major changes. That's not every single change that we have, of course. And with our time frame, I did expose you to those major changes. But understand we're always here to help. And Ryan, go ahead and take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Bob, for your very informative talk about the newest changes of NFPA 70E. We're getting a lot of great questions coming in the line. So let's keep them coming, guys. The Q&A line is open, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can in the next 15 minutes or less to keep you within that hour time frame. again, for those of you who couldn't see this presentation clearly, be able to read it, we're going to make sure that you do have the PDF of these slides and the recording in crystal clarity for you, so you can always watch this back. That'll be available on our website within 2 business days of the webinar, as well as, again, the PDF hard copy of those slides as well. So yeah, call us, give us a call, give us an email if you have further questions after this. We're going to try to, again, to get to all of them. And one thing I want to let everyone know here is just one thing we're doing special for this webinar here is basically if you're able to, with your team, follow up for an arc flash safety training by October 31st, we can actually offer you a discount if you're part of this webinar. So feel free to give us a call for $200 off any single person's registration, or $1,000 off a whole group's on-site training where we come to you. So just keep that in mind. So let's see. Here's a question for you, Bob. One person finds that many of their electricians have not been trained on 70E since about 2008. Is that a problem?
Yes. So in the 2012 version of 70E, there was a proposal, and it was accepted by the technical committee, that all electrical workers, qualified electrical workers, and anybody that might be exposed to a hazard, that would be the unqualified people also, have to have updated training every 3 years. So when this document is revised every 3 years, then we have to attend some type of retraining or additional training that is going to give you an idea of those changes. And it's not a webinar like this. It's more going to be a very interactive training where we can watch people perform tasks with their meter. And so it's a much more detailed training than what we saw today. But that was a great question. Thank you for that question.
Absolutely. And here's a good question for clarification, and maybe good for educational too. What is NFPA's definition of exposed?
Okay, not insulated. Okay, so there's no insulation there whatsoever. We have something that is energized to a certain level of voltage that we can reach out and touch with our bare hands.
Gotcha. And kind of similar along the vein of creating that electrically safe working condition. Someone was curious about what we meant by the policy added to that electrically safe work condition.
Sure. So
and what
that is going to be something in your safety program that all of your workers will have to follow when they de-energize a piece of equipment for repair. You're going to have that in your electrical safety program of the steps that they have to go through. And one of those steps would be identify all possible sources of electrical supply to the equipment. Another step in there would be we're going to release all stored energy, and we're going to block it and lock and tag it out. And there's 8 of those steps. And those steps now have to be part of your electrical safety program. They have to be spelled out. And you should monitor those steps when a worker is de-energizing a piece of equipment, and he has to go through all 8 steps and their verification process. And it has to be part of your electrical safety program, because a lot of injuries are caused because we didn't follow the right procedure. And so that procedure now has to be part of your safety program.
Got you. And so we're getting lots of a wide variety of different curiosities and questions. Thank you all for your curiosity. So some of these committee statements that we've been seeing throughout the presentation, are those available in print somewhere? So someone reflects on the fine print notes that might be available for some other NFPA books, like the
Sure.
handbook for the code. Is that the case for these committee statements as well?
So those technical committee statements are only going to be found on the NFPA website. And the second slide that I showed, and I can go back there pretty quickly. I mean, I didn't have all that many slides, but the second slide I showed did show you the actual website that you can go to get there, and here it is. So this right here is the actual second revision, and you go there and you would see the 2021 uh, basically the whole document and what it's going to look like before it's published. And every single change, the technical committee has their statements on that website. And so you have to go to nfpa.org. When you get there, I gave you the website of after you're already there. But when you get there, you would actually go to a list of the code and standards. And when you got to that list of code and standards, you would go to the next edition tab, and then you could see everything that the technical committee wanted to stress. And so you can look at all those committee statements just like I did, no issues.
Awesome. And again, for those of you who weren't able to see that link in its entirety, or it's too blurry, or obviously you can't click on the link right now, it will be available on the PDF that you can actually probably click that link on the PDF. You should be able to access it that way. So here's a great question, and we get it all too often in the classroom here, Bob, and this is a great one to clarify for everyone here. Let's talk about the arc flash PPE requirements when we're operating a circuit breaker. So if we're flipping on, flipping off a circuit breaker, even though nothing is exposed, is there an arc flash hazard to an operator regardless of the size or voltage of these circuit breakers?
So that would depend on the condition of maintenance of the circuit breaker. And it would also depend upon how the breaker was manufactured and how we are operating that breaker. So if it's a low voltage molded case circuit breaker, if we have performed everything that the manufacturer wants us to do for maintenance, and we've documented that maintenance, and all the covers are on, everything's closed, no evidence of impending failure, then operate the circuit breaker with no personal protective equipment. There's no issues if all those conditions can be met. Now, if the breaker is the type of breaker that we have to rack out for it to be de-energized, then just that process of racking in and out of a breaker, then there is the possibility of arc flash. So then the worker would definitely have to put on some arc-rated clothing. That is a task that the technical committee says that that there is a possibility of an arc flash occurring if you're racking something in and out. But if it's a smaller breaker, molded case breaker, and all we're doing is using our hand to turn it on and off, then it depends on the condition of maintenance of that breaker. And if you can prove that you have maintained that breaker in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, you've documented that, should not have to have on any personal protective equipment.
Awesome. And one question I can answer real quick is, yes, someone saw an acronym used here, AHJ. Is that the same as JHA? And definitely a job hazard analysis, JHA, is different than an AHJ, which is an authority having jurisdiction. Is that right, Bob?
That is 100% right. And
All right.
one thing I would add to that, though, is the authority having jurisdiction many times in the industrial world is somebody in the facility. In the contracting world, it's usually an electrical inspector. Sometimes it's an insurance inspector. Sometimes it's an OSHA inspector. But the authority having jurisdiction, that person could wear many different hats.
For sure. Speaking of hats, funny segue, but well, let's talk about some PPE specific questions we're getting. One person would like to see a clarification on, did they see correctly that safety goggles plus balaclava instead of a face shield plus balaclava is allowed?
Well, here's the story on that, is that we are always going to have to wear, depending on what the incident energy is, but we are always going to have to wear either safety glasses, Z87, or goggles, our choice. That's a choice, which to me, the safety glasses are much more user-friendly, and the face shield. So the face shield is going to be with that also, and the balaclava, all the way up to 12 calories if we're using the instant energy analysis method. When you get above 12 calories, then you're going to be wearing a switching hood. And so when you choose your personal protective equipment, we have two methods to choose that: the incident energy analysis method or the PPE category method. And some, depending on which method you use, depending on the incident energy, there could be times you don't have to put the balaclava on at all. And so when we do our regular 2-day seminar, we really go through that selection process for personal protective equipment. Sometimes we can save the worker a little bit. Maybe they don't have to put as much on. Sometimes they might have to put a little more on than what they believed. But there are two methods that we use, and it's quite in depth. And so you're always going to have on some type of eye protection underneath your face shield. Sometimes it will be in conjunction with a balaclava. Sometimes not, depending on the method that you use.
Mm-hmm.
You get above 12 calories, you're definitely going to have on that switching hood with Z87 safety glasses on underneath.
Absolutely. And when it comes to outerwear, like vests and raincoats, do those have to have at least some level of arc rating? And the answer is yes, right? I mean, anything that's going to be exposed to that arc flash
Yeah,
would need some sort of arc
yes, it
rating,
would.
right?
It would have to have an arc rating on it if you are planning on going inside the boundaries. So if you're going inside the arc flash boundary, inside the limited approach and restricted approach boundary with the intention of removing a cover and exposing some energized conductors or parts, then all of that outerwear would have to be arc rated. Yes.
Got a really great question from someone up in Canada here. How would you comment, just from your experience there, Bob, about how NFPA 70E might trickle up to, let's say, CSA, the Canadian Standards Association, and the Underwriters Laboratory and things like that? This individual's up in Canada, and no
Sure.
doubt he thinks that this will trickle up to them eventually.
Oh, it's already in Canada. And
Mm.
so Canada has a different standard than we have. Uh, it's called Z. I forget the last number of it, but I can tell you that the authorities in Canada work so close with the NFPA and OSHA that the Canadian standard is not only as good as the NFPA 70E, but at times it's even better. And so there is a Canadian standard, and it's been so long since I've had to do any training up there. Z64 comes to mind. I'm not 100% sure of what it is, but that Canadian standard is an outstanding document, and it's being enforced in Canada. You should get a copy of it if you're doing work in Canada, because that's what the Canadians are using to make sure their workers are safe, and it's an excellent document.
Excellent. I think I can take one more question here. And again, you guys are all asking really great questions. I say keep the conversation going. In fact, you're only a couple of phone calls away from talking to Bob or myself directly about this. If you see this phone number here, 877-978, you're going to get in touch with our customer service team, and they basically patch you right through to us to help answer your questions about electrical safety and training and all that. So feel free to utilize us. In that way. We definitely love chatting about you. It doesn't even mean you have to register for a class necessarily. We just like chatting to our people who are out there doing this work, and it's educational for us as well. So the last question I can take right now, I think it would be a good one that hopefully many people also are thinking, and that is, let's see, it's all around a person's technicians. Should the technicians in a facility all have their own PPE, or would you recommend they can share PPE within a certain set of limits? What would you recommend?
So that's a great question, and my recommendation is going to be in contrary to what OSHA does publish, but OSHA does allow people to share personal protective equipment as long as it fits properly and it is sanitary. So it has to be completely clean and it has to fit properly. But here's Bob's recommendation. Bob's recommendation is that Bob doesn't want to wear anything that other people wear. Bob, there's a reason that the first word is personal.
Right.
And so Bob likes to have each person to have their own personal protective equipment, because one, it's real difficult to know if the other person might have damaged the PPE when they had it. But it is legal. So I do have to tell you that OSHA does allow it to be shared, but it has to fit properly and be sanitary. But Bob's recommendation is every person should have their own personal protective equipment.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for a very informative hour, and thank you all for being here. And thank you for all your questions. Again, let's continue the conversation on the line, and we look forward to hearing from you all soon. Thank you so much, and have a great day.